Thanks so much for joining me. Very serious wildfire situation unfolding in the South Okanagan Valley region of British Columbia, particularly impacting the community of Summerland as the Bald Range wildfire moved into the community late Friday evening. This fire ignited likely about 5:30 p.m. local time west of the community and exploded in size to nearly 10,000 hectares as of Saturday morning. And we can see here very concerning videos popping up on social media. This one shared by Alexander Zoltan on X, showing a number of structures fully involved in flame there. This is from the Falder area west of Summerland earlier in the evening on Friday, where we know a number of folks were actually evacuated by helicopter as a result of their one road into the community being blocked by the wildfire. So very concerning, very scary situation out there. We know the fire made a very rapid run to the east, crossing over Highway 97 even by the early morning hours of Saturday. This image here shot by Zachary C. showing that scenario. Again, very volatile conditions out there, extreme fire danger, extremely dry fuels. This fire really showing signs of extreme fire behavior. We know that there were about 20,000 people forced from their homes as well, much of that in the overnight hours from Summerland. That'd be very challenging scenario there. A lot of folks heading down to Penticton and some heading up toward Kelowna. In Penticton here again from Alexander Zoltan, an image from the Walmart in Penticton showing a number of trailers there. And we know that Peach Fest is ongoing in Penticton, but there's also a lot of evacuees now in the community as well. This fire really showing signs of extreme fire behavior. Again, this is a bark plate, a big chunk of scorched bark being reported in Summerland. This was still when the fire was well to the west. So this from CamScan here. We know that when you see debris this size several kilometers downwind of the fire, that the updraft or the strength of the vertical motion above the fire is very strong, and it's lofting these chunks of debris well downwind. And if they're still smoldering when they hit the ground, they can land on dry vegetation and actually cause what's called a spot fire. And we see evidence of that in this fire spread. We heard reports that this fire was throwing off embers at least a kilometer ahead of itself, at least ahead of the main sort of organized flame front. This is the head of the fire here, entering the community of Summerland. Excuse me. And we can see as ahead of that organized flame front, we've got these spot fires igniting out ahead of it. So again, that can cause the fire to progress a lot faster than just the progression of this organized flame front here along the head of the fire. It can sort of reconstitute itself with these spot fires out ahead, causing it to travel that much more quickly. From firemap.live here, this is a map showing satellite indicated hotspots here, and these sort of more orangey, lighter reds show a little bit older detections. This is as of sort of mid-afternoon Saturday now, showing 10 hours ago, with more recent detections here in these darker reds 2 hours ago. So again, we're seeing some action continuing in sort of the northern flank there, and especially in the southern flank. But in general, most of that fire spread occurred fairly quickly late Friday evening into Saturday morning. And we know if we look at this map here, we can see underneath it, you can see this officially sort of mapped perimeter there of the fire. And so you need personnel on the ground and in the air to confirm exactly where that perimeter exists. We do see other areas where the hotspots are showing up and that perimeter is not showing up on the map there. We have to be careful in some of these areas, like over Lake Okanagan. Obviously, we know there's no fire on the lake there. And areas here in Summerland, this is concerning. You see these hot spots, but when you have high winds, sometimes the hot smoke itself can trigger these pixels. And so we have to really kind of pay attention to where this official perimeter has been mapped here. And it looks like it came right up to the edge of the community of Summerland and continues to spread southward. We'll talk a bit more about how this could spread given our weather conditions in the coming days. But again, looks like it ignited along the road there near Trout Creek, west of Summerland, west of Falder as well. So again, that's fairly suspicious given the fact that there has been no lightning in that area. We have very likely human caused along a roadway. It could be any number of causes, whether accidental or intentional. We're not going to speculate any more than that. But nonetheless, we need to be extremely careful out there given the fire danger across the landscape. Of course, we've got evacuation orders over a very large area, basically anywhere from the south side of Peachland all the way just to the northwest of Penticton there. So highly impactful. And of course, again, over 20,000 people so far displaced from their homes. Highway 97 in both directions closed there through that same stretch as a result. Not a great time to be in the South Okanagan right now. Let's talk about the fire spread here that occurred and what some of the factors that caused it to spread so quickly and even, some of these factors that could continue to be important in the spread of this fire. in the coming days. This is when the fire initially took off on Friday evening, and immediately these really hot pixels here showing very intense fire behavior at the surface and evidence of very deep convection again there. That just means that this smoke plume goes really high into the atmosphere, high enough that it cools and condenses into cloud there, into a pyrocumulus cloud there. And again, that's a sign of, when you have both this sort of what we call plume-dominated behavior, when the fire power itself is really driving the fire and the fire behavior on the ground. It's combining with winds as well. So you're seeing both combining, making a truly intense wildfire there. And that's the reason why we were seeing those chunks of debris falling well downwind. One of the factors here we can see looks like, upwind, there's a lot of fires burning, but we had this gap there where there was likely some southwest winds blowing. That might have actually played a role in the severity of this fire, given that, it was a lot brighter and sunnier than it would have been had you been, somewhere under the smoke farther to the east. It was probably a little bit hotter and windier at the surface, given this gap in the line here where this clear air was where that fire ignited. And this image here from the BC Wildfire Service showing that deep convective plume here. Again, really, that's where you'd be seeing these chunks of debris being lofted and then kind of raining down ahead. This looks like this image was shot somewhere near West Kelowna, looking southwestward. Peachland would be about here, Summerland down here, and that's Okanagan Mountain there, where, of course, there was a major fire in 2003. So fire country here in the Okanagan Valley, but extreme conditions out there given the drought across the landscape. Let's talk about some of the weather conditions that have been playing a role in the spread of this fire and the forecast as well. So I'll click a map here from Spot WX. We'll click on Mount Conkle there and look at the HRDPS. This is a Canadian high resolution weather model. Some of the weather that we're dealing with here. High of 31 degrees, getting up into the low 30s during the day, relative humidity in the mid-teens, 15% or so. Whenever your temperature value is higher than your relative humidity value, we call that crossover. It's just very hot, dry conditions that are very favorable for fire spread. Extreme fire weather continuing across the landscape there. But notice here, especially in the late evening, we see these peaks in the wind. This played a role in the fire spread on Friday night, and it likely could play a role in the fire spread in the coming days as well. Again, the smoke is going to play a big role in how ultimately all of this pans out. The smoke could actually knock a few degrees off the temperature and limit the amount of wind that we see. But in the evening, during the day, the winds are going to be relatively light, which is generally a good thing. Of course, you're going to see limited wind-driven spread. Of course, the fire is working through very dry fuels and steep slopes, so that could cause still some rapid growth locally. But overall, not wind-driven during the day, during the peak heating of the day. But in the evening hours, we see this sort of these maxima of wind speed. So what gives? Why is it getting suddenly very windy right around 8, 9, 10, 11 p.m. In the evening? Well, let's talk about it here. This is a forecast model from the RDPS, and it's showing, this is British Columbia here, we have a relatively weak surface pressure gradient. So there's not much, difference between high and low pressure. So you end up with fairly light surface winds during the day as a result. And, you have lower pressure and hotter temperatures here over the interior of Washington state. This generally causes a sort of light northerly flow down the Okanagan Valley in these type of sort of hot, stagnant summer conditions. During the day, you get that light northerly wind down the valley, but at night, given the clear skies, the plateau to the west of the Okanagan Valley cools off more rapidly than the valley itself. This causes a reservoir of colder air that is more dense than the air to the east in the valley, and it literally flows down the slope into the Okanagan Valley. As soon as the sun goes down, and you get the rapid cooling on that elevated plateau to the west here, looking at a topographical map of the Okanagan Valley, there's Kelowna, Penticton, Summerland. You can see much higher terrain to the west. So again, the sun goes down, you get the cooling, you get this reservoir of cool, dense air, and it flows rapidly down into the Okanagan Valley. So again, that's exactly where that fire spread rapidly on Friday night. And it looks like given the very stagnant forecast, it's going to be lather, rinse, repeat in the coming days where we see that downslope wind, what we call a katabatic wind, this gravity-driven downslope flow off the higher terrain into the Okanagan Valley. So this is going to continue to be a factor in the coming days. And again, this is a little bit confusing perhaps to look at the beginning, but just basically showing a vertical profile of temperature and humidity and winds above the surface of the earth here from the HRDPS weather model. Again, 5 p.m. Sunday evening, you can see no winds in the lower part of the atmosphere. And suddenly you get to 8 p.m. local time and you got these ripping, 10 to 15 knot west-northwesterly winds here forecast at Summerland in the lower part of the atmosphere. Again, it's light, not too far above, but maybe 3 kilometers above sea level, light winds, but you have this local maximum of wind above the ground. That's the result of this downslope, what we call katabatic wind. This is going to play a major role potentially in the spread of this fire in the coming days. We can see it in other models. This is the NAM 3 kilometer. Keep an eye here on this, the southern Okanagan Valley here, and you can see winds really gusty there in the late evening hours, and then it kind of peters out into the early morning hours. And then again, that following day, they ramp up in the evening hours, they peter out in the early morning hours. Lather, rinse, repeat. So it's really going to be the evening hours that are going to potentially bring us our most concerning spread conditions. Again, this is a cross section of the atmosphere above the Okanagan Valley at about 10 p.m. local time. And we can see, again, lighter winds about 3 kilometers above sea level, but much more increased winds down here in the lower part of the atmosphere. Again, that's those drainage flows off the elevated terrain to the west. So we can see it in the models, and we know that could play a role in the spread of this fire in the coming days. So we're going to have to keep an eye out for that. Again, we're seeing activity on the northern flank of the fire. But again, if we have northerly winds during the day, fairly light, the fire would tend to sort of burn back on itself. If the winds are light, though, you will see spread on all of these flanks. But again, light winds pushing from the north to the south, you'll tend to see more growth on the southern flank of this fire. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that during the day. But it's the most, like I say, you're going to get that ramping up in fire behavior. If these downslope winds ramp up every evening, we're going to want to watch out for sort of east and southeastward spread, especially the southern flank. If it continues to burn, then there's a lot of vegetation ahead of it. And hopefully it doesn't make it here to Blue Mountain west of Penticton. Lots of vegetation for this to work with. If we see these sort of ramping up in these fire spread conditions in the evening hours, this fire could progress potentially down toward the city of Penticton in the coming days. Again, Mother Nature not giving us any help in terms of precipitation. So again, lather, rinse, repeat, these evening wind maxima occurring. We'll have to watch out for south and southeastward spread. You get a little bit of southerly spread during the day because of the northerly winds, and then you get that ramping up in the evening. So we'll have to watch out for that. Again, there's also the potential if this fire really gets going through some of these fuels and there's winds aloft that are strong enough to push some of those embers across the lake. We would also want to watch out for, say, the Naramata area on the east side of the south side of Okanagan Lake here, because there's a lot of green vegetation to work with here. So also, we really don't want to see that fire jumping over the lake here if it gets going intensely fairly close to the western side of Okanagan Lake here, because there is a potential, given the relatively narrow sort of distance across the lake there, that the fire could move onto the east side. Again, we'll have to see how this plays out. That's just only if we see intense fire here and strong winds blowing this direction. But again, in the coming days, we're going to have to watch out as this fire continues to progress potentially south and southeastward, approaching the Penticton area. So we're going to have to keep an eye out for that in the coming days. Again, very stagnant weather expected. Highs around the low 30s, overnight lows into the sort of mid-upper teens. So we're not getting much relief. Like I say, the only thing that might actually slow down this fire is the smoke itself, keeping temperatures a little cooler, winds a little bit less gusty during the day. But again, not much help in the way of precipitation coming from Mother Nature there across Oregon, Washington, southern BC. This area that's on fire right now. Very concerning to see this over the next 7 days. We really need rain across the landscape, and we need it now. From the CIFC website, we can see Canada now at a national preparedness level of 5. That's the highest possible level, where our resources are committed across the board very heavily. United States also at a national preparedness level of 5. So there's not much to go around. And, we do have some jurisdictions that are able to share. British Columbia also agency preparedness level at number 5, which means that our agency fire danger, current fire load, anticipated fire load over the next 7 days are extreme, and agency resource levels are inadequate. There's also no ability for the agency to respond to CIFC resource requests. And a lot of these, personnel, equipment coming from other parts of Canada into BC, say from Quebec, from Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan. So we're doing everything we can out there. This is a mutual aid wildfire. We know we also have personnel and aircraft and heavy equipment coming in from elsewhere to help fight this fire in the area. And again, most of that fire action across Canada right now, even though we're level 5 right now, mostly focused here in southern BC. We also have action continuing there in sort of west central Northwest Territories and portions of western Quebec. But again, really focused here. The biggest problems with wildfire in the southern BC interior, and likely to persist in the coming days, given our forecast, if you live in the area and you're being impacted by this, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. It's a very stressful time. You can get some really good information here from the Emergency Operations Center website, from Okanagan Similkameen, and they're also putting out sort of very regular live stream here from the Regional District Okanagan Similkameen YouTube channel. So check that out for the latest information here. During times like this, a lot of rumors can fly, so it's important that we're getting our information from official sources. Take care out there. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you next time.